American Public Media, this is an American Radioworks documentary. For centuries, the American dream has meant hope for a better life.
Everybody in America has a fair shake to make something wonderful out of themselves.
But a better life has come to mean something else, too.
Our culture in the post-World War II period has really been built around mass consumption.
In today's hard times, many wonder what will become of the American dream.
If we are in this climate for a decade, they're not going to be talking a lot about the American dream.
I'm Stephen Smith. Over the coming hour, we'll chronicle the evolution of America's iconic ideal in the 20th century. It's A Better Life, Creating the American Dream. From American Radioworks. First, this news. From American Public Media, this is A Better Life, Creating the American Dream. I'm Stephen Smith, and I'm in the great registration hall on Ellis Island, a huge tiled room with vaulted ceilings and American flags. Something like a quarter of all Americans descended from immigrants who passed through this room on Ellis Island. They were seeking freedom and opportunity. They wanted a better life for themselves and especially for their children. Ellis Island is now a museum and a park, not far from the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. At the beginning of the 20th century, the promise of Ellis Island, the promise of America, was the chance to better your circumstances no matter what your family name was or what your station was. The American dream meant it didn't matter where you started in life, but what you did with your life. Over the course of the 20th century, the American dream came to mean many other things as well. Among them, you are what you acquire, like a home, a car or two, or a large screen TV. For the next hour, we're going to explore how the American dream got defined and redefined in the 20th century. In this time of economic crisis, some people are wondering if the American dream is still attainable and sustainable. Will the American dream change once more? No one knows who created the term the American dream. A historian first wrote about it in the 1930s. But the dream's ancestry dates back to the first boatload of European settlers who spilled onto Native American land. And from the beginning, there was disagreement over what the newcomers' dream really meant.
You know, the first people to come over here, some of them wanted to get rich. They wanted to make a lot of money.
Jim Cullen wrote a history of the American dream.
There are other people who came over here who did not define their American dream in terms of money. They wanted religious freedom. That was their dream.
For centuries now, writers and political thinkers have described America as a place of possibility. Here, you can pursue your dreams and achieve them. We admire men and women who make something of themselves, as the saying goes. Like Ben Franklin, the iconic self-made man. Franklin was the son of a candle maker. Through hard work and ingenuity, he got an education, he made money, and became an influential author, inventor, and statesman. And he coined a lot of memorable phrases about getting to work early and saving your pennies. Making money, saving it, and spending it to create a better life always formed a core part of the American dream. But that mattered more in the 20th century. No nation in history has ever created wealth on the scale that America did in the 1900s. Americans learned to dream not just of homes, but of mansions, not just of comfort, but of riches. That fantasy began rather humbly about 100 years ago, with a mass invitation to buy.
America, industrial miracle of the century.
This vintage promotional film does a lively job explaining how a revolution in consumer products was born.
Industrial America marshals resources, science, and power unlimited to bring a quality product within the reach of millions.
In the 1910s and 20s, American factories pumped out waves of new devices to make life easier and more fun.
In the 1920s, really in some ways for the first time, Americans began to see themselves as consumers, and that American happiness was something you could purchase.
Historian David Farber.
People were buying radios, they were buying phonographs, they were buying refrigerators, they were buying all sorts of commodities that really hadn't even literally existed before. And so not only did they buy phonographs, they bought phonograph records.
Columbia double disc record, music on both sides, a different selection on each side. 2 records at a few cents above the price of one.
America in the roaring 20s was soaked in visions of rising abundance. Millions of people went to the picture show each week, and as one historian put it, the movies made it seem like most people dressed in evening clothes, lived in elegant homes, and passed their time in cabarets. Indeed, there were some people making it rich, like Hollywood moguls and Wall Street financiers. But the new prosperity of the jazz age left many people out.
I wanna die easy, Lord, when I die.
Most Americans, and again, it's really important to stress this, most Americans did not actually participate in that era of abundance. Over 80% of Americans by 1929, before the Great Depression, had no savings whatsoever. Overwhelmingly, Americans could not afford, for example, to buy an automobile. Most Americans still hadn't lived the prosperity that the era promised. They saw it, they were surrounded by it, but it wasn't yet omnipresent.
Historian David Farber says this was especially true for African Americans.
They were at the bottom of the job queue. They were restricted by Jim Crow laws. In the South, they couldn't vote. Overwhelmingly, rural blacks and even urban blacks were not part of what we think of as these ballyhoo years.
Now I wanna cross over, Lord, when I die.
And yet, it was in the 1920s that African Americans began streaming north from the South, choosing factory work over the fields. The Great Migration would reshape the lives that Black Americans could imagine for themselves. The ballyhoo 20s included women more directly. Women got the vote, more women started going to college, and for those who could afford the new appliances, housework got a lot easier. But it would still be many decades before women would enter the workforce in big numbers and transform the wealth and buying power of American households. The American dream didn't necessarily include all that in the 1920s, but the expanding prosperity seemed almost limitless. But of course, it wasn't limitless.
I'm going to tell you something. My life is changing, and it's not great.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech.
Will the next one?
It still looks like a war zone here. It looks like ground zero.
Will the next round hit my husband, hit my soldier?
Does he have a crush on me? No. Figures.
I just believe I'll die for my cause.
Hearing is seeing.
From American Public Media, this is an American Radioworks documentary.